The quiet city of Hartford, Wisconsin is the kind of place you move to get away from big city noise and violent crime. But over the course of one weekend, one shocking act of violence will change the town forever.
Crime is real, evil is real. It comes to big cities, it comes to small towns. It's everywhere.
And the life of a promising young musician will come to a tragic end.
And there was no warning signs. Nobody saw this coming.
It's a packed house in Hartford, Wisconsin, for the opening weekend of the Hartford Players' Fiddler on the Roof. The young woman playing the titular role of Tevye is Jessie Blodgett, a musical virtuoso.
How do you capture a person? Jessie's too big for words. She was really smart. But she was also wise, and her friends later in life will tell you that she was an old soul. Jessie was 3 when we moved to Hartford, and I thought Hartford was out in the boonies and it was cow country, and I didn't really want to come here, and I was so wrong.
The small city of Hartford is located in Washington and Dodge counties in the state of Wisconsin. It's a sleepy town with a population of only 14,000.
It's a very nice community, and you trust people. It was just very, very nice. Beautiful community.
I think it's as safe as it gets. There were 2 murders in Hartford in the 100 years before we moved here.
And even as a police officer that came from a bigger city out here, who was used to locking his doors and locking everything, got to the point where we just didn't do that anymore because, well, what was the sense that nothing was going to happen here? Nothing happens in Hartford.
That summer, she tried out for the Hartford Players' Fiddler on the Roof after freshman year of college. Won the title role. She became the fiddler. She called the cast her second family. She loved them and they loved her. And they performed Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that opening weekend. And that Sunday night was the cast party out at somebody's farm with, there was a llama farm and a pool. So she was gone pretty much the whole day and I didn't see much of her at all that day. My favorite story from the party was there's this photo of Jessie in the llama pen, and Mama Llama is about 10 feet away from Jessie. Her friends warned her not to go in there because llamas spit and they aim for our eyes and they are accurate. My independent daughter went over that fence anyway, and when they warned her not to, she stopped and turned and said to them, "If I respect her, she'll respect me." Apparently a few minutes later, baby llama is now approaching Jessie, and Mama Llama had apparently released baby to go play with Jess.
As the night goes on, Jessie and her friend Kelly are hanging out at the cast party, but eventually get separated. Later that evening, when Kelly goes to find Jessie, she's on the couch with a fellow cast member.
Jess had concerns about 2 men at the party and thought they were a little inappropriate with her and thought they were flirting with her at a level that was a little uncomfortable for her. Jessie came home from the cast party that night. Being dad, I was asleep, and Joy being mom, she couldn't sleep until Jess got home, and she went out to say goodnight to her and talk to her, and She could sense that something was a little wrong, and Jessie didn't want to talk too much about it. The next morning, Jessie sleeps in. She had a job at the rec center where she got up early, like 6, every day for 6 weeks, and that had just ended on the Friday before. She also was the fiddler and the fiddler on the roof, and they practiced and worked hard for 4 to 6 weeks. So all summer she was really busy with that. This was her first morning after opening weekend, after the late night cast party. Jessie was left home alone at age 19 on a Monday morning, about 9 a.m., just to, sleep in.
Joy comes home for lunch and checks in on Jessie. And what she discovers is horrifying.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Hartford 911, what's the location of your emergency?
My daughter is blue. I went to wake her up, and I just got home from lunch, and she won't wake up.
Okay, so is she breathing?
I don't think so, no. Jessie, she's cold.
She's cold?
She's cold. Oh my God. It looks like strangulation marks.
There are strangulation marks?
That's what it looks like. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on.
I'm in my office at the clinic and about a half an hour from home when I get the phone call that every parent fears. I talk to Joy, and she's crying and hard to understand. And she said, honey, it's Jessie, it's Jessie. She said that she just arrived home, and she went upstairs and found Jessie, and she wasn't responding. So I hung up the phone, grabbed my keys, and left the clinic and drove 30 minutes home to Hartford. It was like time stopped during that 30-minute drive home. I still remember smelling the diesel exhaust from the semi in front of me at one point. I still remember it was a bright blue Wisconsin summer sky day with big puffy white clouds and a lot of sunshine. I remember seeing a red-tailed hawk being chased by a little songbird like we often see when I drive around on the freeway in Wisconsin in the summer. It was like I was in a different state than I've ever been in before, like I was super aware of everything, and time had completely stopped. And it was like an eternity in a moment. And I found myself talking to God the whole way home, which is kind of a funny thing for an atheist to do. And just begging him to spare Jessie.
They had called me shortly after the initial call saying that they needed an evidence technician to come in, process the scene. They had a suspicious death at that time.
And when I opened up into the living room and saw Joy on the couch with first responders on both sides of her, holding her hands, one look at her face, and then I knew, I could tell by looking at Joy that Jessie was gone. I was still in the state of hyper-awareness, so it was weird, like I could see or feel or whatnot, everybody all around us, staring at us in our most private moment. And I was just focusing on Joy as best I could.
When you have a scene like that, there's people coming and going, family members, emergency staff, ambulance crew, whoever's involved at that site creates evidence. As soon as you get there as the lead investigator, you clear the scene. Now you have to start removing layers of contamination if there was. Fortunately today, emergency staff wear rubber gloves, which don't do much damage, but there is still things coming out of their pockets. They're using possible drugs to revive someone. All of this stuff puts contamination, and you have to eliminate that from the scene. That's done ASAP.
Detective Zywicki enters Jessie's bedroom and approaches the body.
Jessie was on the floor. She was still there. I had seen the ligature mark around her neck. And this was now a crime scene.
There were 2 murders in Hartford in the 100 years before we moved here. Jessie became the 3rd.
An opening weekend performance of Fiddler on the Roof plays to a sold-out crowd, and Jessie Blodgett steals the show.
She called the cast her second family. She loved them and they loved her. And they performed Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that opening weekend, and had the traditional cast party Sunday night.
But the behavior of some of the men in the theater company leaves Jessie feeling a little uneasy.
And that was her last night. Jessie was left home alone at age 19 on a Monday morning just to sleep in. And she was sleeping peacefully in her own bed. And when I saw Joy on the couch, one look at her face, and I could tell that Jessie was gone.
And detectives have reason to believe she was murdered. It's Monday, July 14th, 2013, and Jessie lies dead on her bedroom floor.
Jessie was a really talented musician who just earned the title role in Fiddler on the Roof. She had so many dreams and aspirations which now have been cruelly stolen from her.
Jess was a musician. In first grade, my dad, her grandpa, bought her a little starter keyboard. And I thought, I'm gonna sign both of us up for piano lessons. I've always wanted to play the guitar. Now's the perfect time. She won't go if I don't go. So we started lessons together. She became a musician by high school who could just hear a song and sit down at the piano and just play it and sing the words too. And she came home one day in that summer and announced that she was changing her major to music ed. And I thought, oh no, she's gonna be a starving artist. She's gonna, struggle to make a living, and I was so wrong. She'd been discovered in a karaoke bar. She was offered pretty quickly a prestigious talent scholarship in the Peck School of the Arts at UW-Milwaukee. She made this little flyer that summer announcing that she was gonna start teaching music lessons, voice, piano, and violin. I saw the flyer and I thought, hey, that's pretty good. We gotta get that around town, honey. You could do this. And we stuffed mailboxes, her and I, for a couple months, driving around an hour or two a week. And within 2 months, she had 28 young students come into our house for voice, piano, and violin lessons. But it was more than just loving music. She also was real social justice minded. She wanted to change the world. And she was 19 and believed she could. And she thought she would do it through music.
Singing this song for you. There's nothing I wouldn't do. I'll be there. I'll be there for you. La 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 la.
She was also getting interested in a variety of social justice causes. The last one she landed on, and her biggest one in life, ironically, was what she called male-on-female violence. And for 2 years, she was pretty fierce about it, and she talked with me about it and tried to tell me about it, and I listened, and we walked around the block with the dog every day, and I thought I heard her, but I didn't get it. Like I think most of us don't until it becomes real, because it hits home and it hits our family.
I'll be here. I'll be here for you.
It's the morning after the cast party and after Jessie's parents leave for work. Someone has something heinous in mind.
I do an initial walk around the house and I'm just glancing at windows. Does it appear any windows are ajar? Does it appear anything's cracked? Does it appear any doors were kicked? Any pry marks? Anything like that? So I'm just being very cognizant when I open and I go into these rooms. It's more or less of my hands are in my pocket, because as cops we like to touch stuff. So hands go in the pockets, and it's just a visual experience for me. Just looking around, seeing what's in the room, and just kind of getting a feel of what happened and putting myself in that position. First impression of the room, it looked a little cluttered. I didn't know if it was something that had been ransacked, and I saw that she had a number of things posted on her wall.
The detectives learn about the cast party Jessie had attended the night before.
So at that point, we need to get names of those individuals. Anyone that was upset with Jessie. Did she have an argument with Jessie? Did she have a romantic interest with anybody? What doesn't look like it belongs here? What looks like it's out of place?
At the scene, detective found her diary and checked the last entry of that day, and it mentioned her feeling uncomfortable at an after party for Fiddler on the Roof, where an older man had given her uncomfortable feelings at the party. Obviously, this is something that has to be followed up. Well, now they would backtrack, go to the people at the after party, find out who this guy is, identify him, and then bring him in for questioning as a person of interest at this point in time.
Detective Thickens starts interviewing friends of Jesse. While talking to Kelly Krill, he soon discovers the name of an older cast member that was quite physical and flirtatious with Jesse at the cast party.
Some of the people had expressed that there were some concerns that some of the older guys that were at this cast party might have been acting a little bit inappropriately with some of their language. So of course that's something we're interested in.
Detective Thickens calls the cast member and tells him that he's investigating the circumstances surrounding the death of Jesse Blodgett.
They would contact this individual and bring him in for an interview. And he would be questioned about why would she make that entry in their diary. If he's cooperative, he's going to state possibly why she would say that. If he doesn't know, he would just give his opinion of what the relationship was, what they did at the party. Were they swimming in the pool? Were they sitting having drinks? But something obviously happened to make her write that in the diary, which would lead the police down that direction for a time to make sure that he's either confirmed as a suspect or eliminated as a person of interest.
Did this man, who is twice Jesse's age, try to take advantage of the young performer and then kill her when she refused his advances? While detectives go over the crime scene, the man from the party meets Detective Thickens at the police station.
So when they bring in this individual for questioning, he is obviously distraught that she's been murdered, and obviously he cooperates with the police by stating where he was with her the night before, what they had done. And I believe that you get a good sense from the person at that time whether you're on the right track or not with them. And then you proceed to find out if he has an alibi. During the interview, he confirms that they had swam together in the pool at this after party, sat together at the same table, and you can only speculate if something happened or was said that would make her enter that into her diary.
The man states the last time he saw Jesse was at the party around midnight. The detective asks him to submit to an oral swab, and he complies.
Based on your initial view of him in this interview, his reaction, his cooperation by providing the swab, you tend to move him off to the side as a prime suspect.
Later, he's released. The detective doesn't think he's Jesse's killer, so there's no reason to hold him.
Back at the house, Detective Zywicki finishes his cursory search of the home at the crime scene, Jesse's bedroom.
There were some extension cords that were an immediate interest of mine at the foot of the bed underneath it. I had also seen that she had some blinds that had ropes on them. If this was a crime of opportunity and this person used whatever they found in the room to commit this crime, we would be able to collect that and potentially get evidence off of it.
Having finished his initial search, the detective begins collecting items as evidence.
What in here would make a ligature mark around someone's neck? I think after all was said and done, we probably were close to 100 articles of evidence that we had collected. Prior to securing the body, I had placed paper bags over both of her hands because it's very common in situations where there may be strangulation or there may be even stab wounds or anything that's a close personal type of attack. There could be some DNA underneath fingernails, on hands, from scratching or attempting to fight an individual off.
Meanwhile, Buck and Joy wait downstairs for more answers.
We didn't know what was going on there. They're the only ones allowed up there. I couldn't even go upstairs. Detective Thickens would come down and he'd ask us some more questions and he would tell us a little bit.
After the body is removed, Detective Zywicki is joined by Detective Thickens.
We kind of looked around and we said, you know, they told us in school when you go to evidence tech school, there's always something you're gonna miss. What do you think we're missing here? And that's, we find the roll of tape underneath the bed by Jesse. I had examined the rest of the house as an evidence tech, and I understood that this tape was the type of tape that's used on air duct systems and venting. So I had gone down and checked their venting system to see if that tape is the same type of tape that we found under the bed, and it just wasn't. It was a different type of tape. So now we know that we're dealing with something that's potentially a foreign object to the house, something that was brought in that has no purpose to be there. So her body was transported down to Waukesha for an autopsy to be conducted, because here we had a probable homicide and we required an autopsy because it's not normal that a child under 20 is found dead in their room.
This sleepy middle American town is rocked by the shocking murder of one of its best and brightest. Jesse Blodgett, a promising young musician with a passion for social justice, is murdered while sleeping peacefully in her bed.
Jessie was on the floor. She was still there. I had seen the ligature mark around her neck, and this was now a crime scene.
Detectives try and narrow down the list of suspects.
There's always something you're gonna miss. What do you think we're missing here? And that's, we find the roll of tape underneath the bed. So now we know that we're dealing with something that's potentially a foreign object to the house, something that was brought in that has no purpose to be there.
This new evidence will show up once again in the most unexpected place.
As far as we can tell, roughly 9 a.m., someone comes in the house, knew all of our schedules, knew Jesse would be sleeping in this morning. Comes in, goes upstairs, had a little backpack with him. He attacks Jessie in her sleep, hog-ties her. He gag-balled Jess, tape around her face and head. He reached for his backpack, which the DA later called at trial his murder kit, and he pulled a rope out of that backpack and apparently put it around Jessie's neck. Apparently he pulled with all he had, not only until she lost consciousness, but to stop the heart. And so he watched life leave Jessie's body.
The killer gathers up their weapons and leaves.
It's the kind of thing residents would never expect to happen in Hartford, but just 2 days earlier, another shocking incident occurred.
On Friday, I think the 12th, a woman named Melissa had been attacked in Richfield County Park by a man with a knife, great big kitchen knife. Attacked her from behind in a gravel parking lot. She heard him coming and turned and looked over her shoulder just in time to see him come to tackle her. And Melissa says, next thing I know, I'm face down in the gravel with this big man on top of me with his arms around me and a great big knife underneath me. And I grab it. Melissa had, I believe, 17 stitches across her hand. She had a severe wound. She wrestled that knife away from him. She said, next thing I remember, we're standing up facing each other. And he says the weirdest thing. He says, "Can I just go now?" And Melissa says, "No." And he turns around and he takes off and he hops in his blue van and peels out of the gravel parking lot. Melissa had the presence of mind in the middle of all that to describe him to a police sketch artist in what that officer called the best description he's ever gotten from anybody. And she couldn't see his license plate, but she described his vehicle. She named the make, the model, and got it to within 1 year of the manufacture of his van. Monday now, 4 days after that, the day after Jesse's murder, the Washington County Sheriff's and Slinger PD is at the Slinger Police Department talking about all this. An officer not involved in that attack in the park case overhears their discussion and says, "Hey, I've been doing patrols in that park and I believe I saw that vehicle." And over time they find out what vehicle that was. They get the registration, call the owner from his cruiser records, and it doesn't match the description. It's an older man. Then they find out that older man has a son who matches the description perfectly and lives with them.
It's Monday evening, less than 12 hours since Jesse's body is discovered, when friends from all over town begin showing up at the Blodgett home.
We shared a lot of tears and a lot of hugs and a lot of memories. It was what the news later called our vigil. They couldn't not come. They just all showed up at our house. So we all just tried to take care of each other, love each other. Everybody was in shock. One of the people who showed up was Dan. He spent hours with us. He shared hugs and tears and memories too, and sat in that circle with us. At some point later in the afternoon, his phone rang. We didn't know it at the time, but it was the Washington County Sheriff calling from Slinger Police Department. Joy sensed that Dan had a concern, and he got up and looked like he was leaving. And Joy went to him and asked about it, and ended up telling him, "Don't worry, Dan, it's gonna be okay. The police are gonna wanna talk to all of Jesse's friends." So he left.
Wherever you want to sit.
Detectives interviewed Dan in regards to the park attack.
Do you know what this is about? This is about an incident that Detective Walsh and I investigated and happened last Friday. You were off last Friday, right?
Yes.
Okay. This happened at a park. And if you have any knowledge about what this is, it's best to tell me now. I understand.
Yes.
Okay. What kind of vehicle do you have?
I drive my parents' caravan. So,
Were you at a park last Friday?
no,
At any?
I don't believe so, no.
What happened to your arm?
Where?
On your elbow?
Fell, probably.
You don't remember? Do you have any other injuries that we need to know about?
No.
You see your hands? Go like this.
What happened to Tom?
Got stabbed with a screw at work.
Go through your day last Friday. What happened?
Don't know. I don't remember any specifics. What is this about?
I already told you what this is about. We're investigating an incident that happened at a park. Okay?
Last Friday.
Last Friday, when you were off work. And I just simply asked if you were there.
No.
Okay.
The vehicle you drive was not only out there that day, but it had been out there other days. Okay. Other days that you were supposed to be at work. Okay.
Okay.
And if we checked with your employer, would you still have your job?
No.
Okay. That's what I thought.
Now Dan's caught in a lie, because he not only wasn't at work, he didn't even have that job that he claimed to have.
When did you lose your job?
A while ago.
So then you want to cut your finger at work.
No.
Where'd you cut your finger?
On a knife. I was cooking and cut my finger on a knife.
So now he makes up another lie that actually I cut myself with a kitchen knife, and I've been lying to my parents that I have this job.
Okay. Hold on a second. Let's talk. Okay. Listen. No more lies. This just makes things worse. It's spiraling out of control. What happened?
I made a mistake.
You were there, right?
I was at the park.
Correct. And you were in your van, correct? Or your mom's van or your...
Yes. But
And you went after that girl, right?
yes.
Okay. Why?
I was scared of someone.
Why were you wanting to scare someone?
Life scares me. I don't handle it well. College was stressful. Left college. Life scares me, and I don't particularly think I'm very good at it. I want to scare someone else. So everyone else is so confident. I understand it.
Why did you pick her?
There's no one else there.
The police place him under arrest, search him, and take him to jail. But there's one important thing detectives recall Dan saying that points them towards Jesse's case.
Where were you at again?
House in Hartford,
Jesse who? Blodgett?
As they're questioning Dan in the Melissa case, it becomes apparent to them that they have a person of interest in Jesse's case.
Is that the girl that just passed?
Yeah, we were visiting.
Okay, sorry to hear about that.
And the mirrors? What happened?
Someone raped and murdered her.
Dan said she was raped and murdered. Nobody knew at that time. There was no talk of a sexual assault. Only one person on the planet knew that there was a rape as well.
And what I want to talk to you about is Jessie Blodgett, and to understand that you are friends with her.
The next day, July 17th, Dan is interviewed as a person of interest in Jesse's case.
Where were you on Monday?
Driving around.
What time did you leave your house?
6:30. What did you tell my parents I work 7 to 5?
Where'd you go?
Felt over. Ended up at Woodlawn. At Woodlawn Park? What time did you end up there? 10 or so.
The police then checked the cameras at Woodlawn Park, and they see Dan entering the park with a backpack about 10 a.m.
Detective Thickens has officers search the area. They comb through the trash and find a cereal box that appears to be stuffed with a paper towel.
They start pulling the stuff out, and they find everything. They find all the ligatures and the bed sheets with blood stains and tape that turned out to have Jesse's hair on it, and wipes with blood on the wipes and saliva.
With this new evidence, officers execute a search warrant for the Bartelts' residence.
And that's where I think the tape more or less really kicked in as something that, hey, we've got something here. I examined their ductwork down in their basement, and it was the exact same tape that we had found underneath Jesse's bed. This type of duct tape wasn't used in Buck and Joy's house. This was specific to Daniel's house.
Intertape 698 would not be something commonly found in someone's possession unless you're working in the air conditioning industry, the furnace industry. It's used for taping ducts. To have that would be a unique piece of tape that if you found it at other scenes would be a very good circumstantial piece of evidence.
The detective has officers try and track down some of the tape in stores and finds that it's unavailable anywhere in the area.
The odds of this tape being at the crime scene at the park, Dan's house, and at Jesse's crime scene are astronomical. That is the piece of evidence that the police would hang on to. You now have something that is not likely to occur, to have those three pieces of tape and those three different scenes, in all probability, originating from the same person.
Everything kept falling into place. And that kept building the case stronger and stronger for us until it was very, very obvious. There was no question.
Detective Thickens interviews Dan once again, and in spite of all the evidence pointing to him as the killer, he continues to deny it. The detective informs him that he is under arrest for murder. Jessie Blodgett is strangled in her own bed while she sleeps.
Someone comes in the house, knew all of our schedules, knew Jessie would be sleeping in this morning.
A thorough search of her room turns up a compelling piece of evidence.
There's always something you're gonna miss. What do you think we're missing here? And that's, we find the roll of tape underneath the bed by Jessie.
And an assault in a park days earlier puts Dan Bartelt on detectives' radar.
Where were you at again?
Just close.
Jesse who?
Blodgett.
What happened?
Someone raped and murdered her.
Dan said she was raped and murdered. Nobody knew at that time. Only one person on the planet knew that there was a rape as well.
Ended up at Woodlawn. A woodland tarp.
Surveillance footage shows Dan at the park on the day of Jesse's murder, so detectives search the area. They check the garbage bins in the washroom, where they find a cereal box with paper towel.
They start pulling the stuff out and they find everything.
A search of Dan's home turns up the same rare tape found in Jesse's bedroom and the park.
This type of duct tape was specific to Daniel's house.
All 3 locations link back to Dan Bartel. Yet in spite of the evidence, he maintains his innocence. Days after Jesse's murder, Detective Thickens informs her parents, Buck and Joy, that they have a suspect in custody, Jesse's friend, Dan Bartelt.
Joy and I basically had the same reaction. The reaction was concern for Dan. How could that be? This is a kid, he was in our home 2 days ago. He sat with all of us and cried and hugged and shared memories.
Dan continues to deny his involvement in the murder, which means the case will go to trial. So now it's up to the detectives to make sure that all the evidence is examined, the DNA is analyzed, and the case against Dan is made perfectly airtight in order to get a conviction and justice for Jesse Blodgett.
Detectives go over the details of the murder based on the evidence and hypothesize how it occurred. On the morning of July 15, 2013, Dan waits for his opportunity to break into the Blodgett home.
He went into a house that he knew his way around. He went into a house that he had been invited into many, many times. He had gone up to a bedroom of a person who was in the most vulnerable state of sleeping.
Dan knew the entire family's schedule, and since Jesse had come to the cast party and stayed up late, he knew she'd be sleeping in.
And he abused that person and subsequently killed that person for his own sick, twisted reasons.
The DNA reports from the ligatures come back, and for Dan, they're incriminating. The autopsy is completed by Dr. Linda Bedrisky, medical examiner for Waukesha County. During her examination, she finds that the ligature marks around Jesse's ankles and wrists are consistent with bindings. She advises that the ligature mark around Jesse's neck, however, is made by a narrower ligature, something with a texture to it, like a rope.
They find the murder weapon, a 3-foot ligature whose pattern perfectly matched the pattern on Jesse's neck. All this stuff had DNA from 2 people and 2 people only. Dan's DNA on the 2 ends and Jesse's in the middle.
The trial lasts only a few weeks.
His DNA is all under her fingernails, under her left hand, on her right hand.
The prosecution has a mountain of evidence against Dan.
I think the attack on the individual at the park was his first run at attempting to harm someone. I think after that, I think Dan went on a scouting mission to find something that wouldn't be so challenging, and that led him to Jesse, unfortunately.
One of those warning signs was Joy came home early for lunch one day, and Dan and Jess were in our music room. And Dan looked up and said, "Jess, what's your mom doing home so early?" And that struck Joy funny at the time. And this was just maybe a week or 2 or so before the murder. You know, now looking back, you realize what he's thinking is he's figuring out schedules and what his window of time is.
There are no witnesses to the murder, and Dan denies having been at the Blodgett house on July 15th. But the DNA evidence is incontrovertible, and Dan's defense is unable to provide any explanation for how this could be. It doesn't take long for the jury to find Dan guilty.
Dan was convicted by the end of the trial, and then sentencing was scheduled for 2 months later, October 14th, 2014. My only chance, by the way, in almost 9 years to sit face to face with Dan. We each had 10 minutes to give our sentencing statements.
Jesse's father delivers a powerful statement to the court.
The first 5 minutes of my statement was all about Jesse and quotes from the outpouring of things people had said and written on social media about Jesse that would show the world who she was to whatever extent words could. For me, her dad, Not only was her life and her future stolen, her voice was stolen, and now I wanted to be her voice and tell people about her, so I did that. And then the second part of my statement was directed to Dan. It began with, I forgive you, and I love you, and I still do. It's genuine. He is forgiven.
On October 14th, 2014, Bartelt is sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole.
This jumpsuit that I'm wearing, these shackles that I'm put in, don't make me guilty. And I know there's evidence that I can't refute that would make you believe that I am guilty.
Judge Todd Martins says that he finds Bartelt too dangerous to ever be considered for supervised release. The once peaceful town of Hartford is forever changed by Dan's shocking acts of violence.
It was stolen innocence, I think. Stolen innocence, not only for the Blodgett family, but I think for this whole community. It was a stolen innocence. I think we understood that maybe we need to lock things up now. Maybe the world's just changing a little bit. You know, crime is real, evil is real. It comes to big cities, it comes to small towns.
But in spite of the fear and pain caused by Dan's violent acts, Joy and Buck move forward with a message of hope, giving a voice to Jesse's passion for ending violence against women.
We started the Love is Greater Than Hate project, Jesse's legacy, and we have a dual mission. The mission is ending violence against our women and inspiring love over hate on the planet. Our vision is a global zero tolerance for interpersonal violence by the end of the century. And, you know, who knows? Nelson Mandela said it always looks impossible until it's done.